For those of you who are joining us, I am here right now with Roger Weinmiller, who is a farmer, and with Bill Evan, who is an attorney. And both Bill and Roger share something in common, and that is the loss of their children to this opioid crisis. So let me start out by saying that this is not a political discussion today. I am running it on my political site because it is an issue that is near and dear to me. And one of the things that as a candidate for public office that I want to do is to elevate some of those issues that I think are important. I want to use this platform as an opportunity to get out to people while people are paying attention to my voice, to get out to people the importance of some of the things that I'm standing for. I ran for office for U.S. House of Representatives. My name is Dr. Vanessa Enoch. Call me Vanessa. But I ran for office back in 2018. And Bill is one of the gentlemen who I ran against in the primary in 2018. So it has been such a pleasure to continue a relationship with Bill and with the other gentlemen that I ran against in that primary, because I realized that we all shared some things in common, although we're very different and have come from different places and different backgrounds. And the same is true of Roger here. Roger, who even politically is a Republican, but Roger pulled me aside and said, hey, if you really want to do something about this opioid crisis, let me tell you what has to be done. So I told Roger, we need to have a conversation. We need to talk, and we need people to understand what it is that people like Roger and Bill face with this whole opioid addiction crisis, and so that people understand that it's real.
Yeah, you know, the first thing is Republican and Democrats as titles.
Exactly. Thank you. And you know what?
We're all human beings.
I have this ongoing discussion on my Facebook page of people who want to come on and attack me because there's a D after my name. And I, in fact, just told somebody the other day, the only thing I care about is that I'm a child of the Most High God. And you can take your D and R discussion and, you know, shove it. I didn't tell them where to shove it because I'm trying to be a good Christian, but I'm telling you, it has tested my patience as a human being when people want to come on and, you know, make everything about these silly wedge issues where we got real issues to delve into, real problems that we face as human beings. And this opioid crisis is one of them, and it has really bothered me. And I'll tell you why it's bothered me. I don't have anybody who I personally love and care about who are currently publicly dealing with an opioid addiction. I'm sure my family members have had addictions and still wrestle with addictions. I've got cousins who are definitely wrestling with addictions. I have a cousin, my youngest cousin, who died last year. They found him washed up in the ocean. This is something that I get very emotional about, who was struggling with an addiction. And also, I was a chemical dependency counselor. And I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people who were wrestling with addiction. And it is something that is near and dear to me. And there are whole towns being wiped out by this whole addiction crisis. And the stigma of it just continues to perpetuate a lot of untruths. And it causes people to say stupid things like they don't want their tax dollars paying for Narcan, and just really pushing against the opportunity to really do something about something that I think is a crisis. I think as a nation, we missed the opportunity to turn this whole stigma of drug addiction around with the crack epidemic. And I hope that we don't miss the opportunity to do that this time, which is why I'm here today to talk to you and to talk to Bill. So it's not a campaign discussion, but of course, if you're interested in donating to my campaign, feel free to go to enochforcongress.com and donate. But this is a this is a conversation about addiction. And so I want to turn the discussion over to you and tell me, first of all, Roger, and then we'll talk to Bill. Why is this whole opioid conversation personal to you?
Well, first and foremost, because I lost 2 kids 9 months apart to it. But prior to that, I would put myself in the category of the people with the stigma. I looked at it as something that they were doing recreationally, as I did when I was in high school, with marijuana and whatnot for a short period of time. But it took me, the night I lost my daughter, which was Easter Eve 2016, she introduced to my house. I'm the one that found her. Night I'll never forget.
What was that date again?
March 26, 2016.
I know you told me it was Easter. Yeah, Easter
And
Eve. Okay.
My son died 5 days before Christmas the same year. Mm-hmm. But the night that I lost my daughter, I sat there on the couch and I made a promise to God and to my daughter and to myself that some way, somehow, I'd find a way to make a difference. God has led me on a very wild journey from various different documentaries and interviews and things. But long story short, I've chosen to take my pain and my loss and to try to turn it into a positive to help others. And even though I'm all about helping the addicts and the recovering addicts and helping their families, I would have to say that my greatest passion is education to the public, especially to those that have not been touched by it or affected by it, or even if they have been touched by it, affected by it. You can live addiction, living addiction and understanding addiction are 2 completely different things, I found out.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to try to get people not to be who I used to be, passing that judgment, saying that, all you got to do is just stop. I now know that it is a disease. A lot of people still are stuck on the choice thing, and it gets touchy on that. But when it comes down to it, there is 90% of the time an underlying issue that drives that choice. Mm-hmm. It's either self-medication because of things that happened in their childhood years. It can go all the way up into their adult years. I will say this myself for the first time on air. After I lost my second child, I had that bottle of pills right there in my hand. I can't tell you how many times, just looking for a way to kill the pain. But thanks to the dear Lord above and my faith in Him and the strength that He gave in me, I was able to fight through it and get where I am today. Is the pain still there? Very much so. The pain's just as raw and real today as it was the day I lost him. But and I also kind of use my story as some form of inspiration to show people what you can. Life has handed to me a silver platter. I grew up without a mom. She died when I was 5. Dad remarried to a lady that, was not very pleasant. And then my first wife died in my arms at the age of 20 and left me with a 9-week-old baby, which that baby is the only child I have living today.
Wow.
Been through 2 divorces, and then here recently, the loss of my kids. And I've done it without resorting to drugs. But
and Roger, first and foremost, thank you so much for sharing your story. You and I share something in common. We're both people of faith. I mean, we share a lot in common, even though we have political differences. We have a lot in common. And one is definitely our faith, which is a sustainer for both of us. But I think even more importantly, we're both human. And I think that whether we share the same faith or not, whether we share the similar life stories. I mean, I'm also a farm girl.
You didn't tell me that.
Yeah, I'm from a little farm town in Portsmouth, Ohio. Oh, yeah. And that's where my family's from. Most people don't know anything about Portsmouth or can't find it on the map. But that's where my family's from Portsmouth and Ironton and little small towns. But I want to make another comparison, and that is the fact that this opioid crisis isn't just going into the rural areas and touching small farm towns. This addiction is touching people everywhere. And I want to turn to Bill just for a second, because Bill,
something I'd like to tell you on that. The last statistics I heard, that I think it was around 76%. I think it was 76 or 77% of all the overdoses nationwide happen in rural America.
wow. And now that's a pretty high statistic. I want to turn to Bill for a second.
Sure.
And Bill, tell us a little bit about why you're so passionate about this issue of opioid addiction.
Okay, first, I'd like to say, Roger, I wish I was there to put an arm around you. I don't know how much help that would be.
Oh,
But yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of Tim's passing.
And who's Tim, Bill?
What was that?
I said, tell us who Tim is. Tell us about Tim.
Oh, Tim is my son. Great kid. Went into the hospital for some knee surgery. Well, they gave him 30 days of OxyContin to recover. And for some people, that's way more than enough to get addicted. But I don't care how somebody got their addiction. That's not for me to judge. There are tons of people out there who are taking baby steps, and that's great. And if nothing else, we'll eventually get there. Now, my way of looking at this is I'm almost 70 years old. I'd like to see this fixed before I pass on. And the way to do that is to get rid of the war on drugs. My website is endthewarondrugs.org. And it gives you all the facts that are out there. We spent $1 trillion over the last 50 years. We have 2.1 million Americans in prison. So we either have to do something about this, or we need to change the national anthem and take out the part about land of the free. No other country on the globe has anywhere near as many of their citizens in prison as we do. So Roger, I'm just kind of overcome by what you've gone through.
Well, I appreciate that. And loss of a child is loss of a child. You have that pain no matter what. I think there's some different degrees that can come along here. If you witness the child, you find the child like what I did, or in other aspects. But
and when you say find a child, you meant you actually found your daughter.
Yes, it was. I mean, if you want me to tell a story, she come to the house to spend the night with us that night because her and her boyfriend had been fighting. And prior to showing up at the house, she was down the street at her mom's house. Her mother and I were divorced. And she was all upset because everybody was accusing her of being back on drugs, which she was higher than a kite then. But over the last year and a half of her life, her and I had established finally just a phenomenal bond. It was a relationship that's just hard to explain. It's just, and she went from addiction to canning and cooking and all these things back to this. And she asked to excuse herself. She went to cook and asked to excuse herself. And I came back in the house and I sat in the recliner and I played 5 games of solitaire. And the whole time I sat in the house, I had this feeling that something was not right. So I had a grain check laying out on my desk. I went back to my office to put it in the safe, which in doing so, I had to walk by the bathroom. And when I came out of the office, it was silent. And I was being a bit of a smart aleck. I knocked on the door and asked her if she was going to spend her whole night in the bathroom. And it was just total dead silence. It's a silence I can't explain. And started getting panicky. My fiance came. We got the door unlocked. And my bathroom's very small, so when I opened up the door, I hit her in the hip. I had to reach around the bathroom door to grab my daughter by the seat of her britches to move her body to where we could get the door open and start performing CPR on her. But from what I went through when my wife passed away, from the look on her face, I knew it was too late. And that bathroom and that hallway still haunt me to this day. But it also, it's kind of one of the many reminders that give me the strength to go out and tell my story. I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of my story, nor am I ashamed of my kids. There's so many parents out there, families out there that have a loved one that's fighting addiction, and they're afraid to talk about it. They're ashamed, they're embarrassed, think that they're going to be judged and whatnot. And that in itself is part of the problem, because as with the addict, the people that go down that road, a lot of them start off, as I said earlier, for something that's happened, major event that's happened in their life. Parents split up, bullied, abused, divorces, bad financial problems, whatever you want to name off. And they feel like they're all alone. They don't have no one to talk to. And then over a period of time, whatever it is that's happened to them weighs them down to where they feel that they just can't cope with it anymore. And then they resort to, and I'm going to say addiction. I'm not just saying drug addiction, but addiction. It could be gambling. It could be shopping. It could be working out. It could be running, sugar, smoking, alcohol, drugs, anything. Unfortunately, a lot of them are turning to drugs. And with the drugs, it's, it's so fatal. I mean, the next time can be your last time. Mm-hmm. And, I've always said all along, if God granted me one wish only, that would be that not another person on this earth would have to go through the pain that I've gone through and still go through to this day.
Mm-hmm. And so Bill also shared the story about just how painful it has been for him. And Bill offered some idea of what he thinks the big issue is and the possibilities for dealing with the issue. What do you think is the biggest challenge to overcoming the opioid crisis at this point?
Well, I'll make it real simple. Stigma in education. Because as the stigma is being slowly erased, we are now, the least number of people you have that have stigma or the bad attitude about drug addictions or substance abuse, the more people you have potentially to open up their eyes and arms to come on board to help fight it. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to contribute to fighting something that you don't believe in or you think's bad or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the ultimate, because you get them to understand addiction. Out in rural America is resources. They are getting better. We are getting more rehabs, but back when I was that person, I had that attitude. My son lived a quarter mile down the road, and my attitude was, you made your bed, you lied in it. But he was 15 miles from the county seat. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a license or you don't have a car, or sometimes both, it's pretty difficult to get from point A to point B. So there's many little things that need to be done to help make this whole thing successful. But if I had to pinpoint it down on one certain thing, it would be the education and stigma, erasing the stigma that comes with addiction and the individuals that are fighting it.
It was interesting. Two things were interesting. I had a recent conversation, even on my Facebook page, where somebody who we were talking about the gun rights issue, and this person said, if somebody's on drugs and they need to be in jail and they're felons, I don't need to pay for their treatment. And you and I had a conversation about what's needed and what should happen, and you had an interesting perspective that I think people should hear. And I want to turn to Bill too and talk about a conversation we had yesterday. But tell me what you think about treatment and incarceration as it relates to the addiction crisis.
Well, what I learned the hard way of all the many things that my kids had done to me, stealing, blah, 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 that the actions that an individual does when they're under opiate or meth addiction is technically not them. It's kind of like the old scenario that, when someone goes on trial, you're innocent by temporary insanity. the opiate addiction rewires the brain, and it literally controls everything that that person does. Their next fix is as important to them as yours and my next breath of air.
Mhm.
It supersedes everything. I don't care how great your marriage is, how rich you are, how poor you are. I mean, look back in history of all the movie stars that have died from addiction or have had a loved one die from addiction.
Mhm.
So, you know, but it's still you. And outside of a small drug possession charge, and when I say a small drug, but a small amount of drugs, obviously, if you have a pound or a half a pound of something in there, that's not
A small amount.
personal use.
Right.
But an amount that would be considered as personal use, that or needles. Yes, it's against the law, but I really struggle with that one as far as incarcerating on that. But if you do a criminal act as such as stealing from somebody and things of that nature, and then even if you want to include the possession or the needle instrument charge, that the jails/prisons have a very effective dual diagnosis program offered to them while they're in there. And what I mean by dual diagnosis is we usually just counsel people on substance abuse. What you know all about that. But have come to find out in recent years, as I've said before, that there's usually something else driving it. So take me, for example, say if I went through a very traumatic, or I'm in very traumatic financial terms, and I resort to drugs as my addiction. Okay. And I let this weigh at me. Well, if you counsel me on substance abuse and you haven't done nothing to work on my brain, and what's really drove me to the addiction, you're going to have the same problem reoccurring over and over and over again, most likely.
So you're saying that people who have drug addictions need treatment, right?
Yes.
So I just want to turn to something Bill said to me yesterday.
And they need mental treatment.
Mental health treatment.
Right.
Okay.
And even if they get addicted by like how Bill's son did, there in itself, or he didn't have the underlying mental issue that drove him to addiction. But after he got in addiction from the opioids, what the opioids do to the brain itself still requires an extensive amount of mental health treatment to get the brain rewired and reprogrammed, working and thinking the way it's supposed to.
Right. And I want to turn to Bill for a second, because Bill and I had a conversation, and Bill actually was afraid for me to carry this torch and to have this conversation today. He says, my concern for you is you're running for office, and this isn't a popular topic because people are going to say you're being soft on crime by having a conversation about addiction. So Bill, tell me a little bit about, because I know that this is your platform. Tell me a little bit about why you were afraid that this particular conversation may not win me votes. And keep in mind, we're having the conversation regardless to whether it wins me votes or not. I am in a very conservative district, and I lost the last general election, and I was my authentic self then, and I am still going to be my authentic self, because I believe that you don't want anybody in office who's going to be one person while they're running and then get in office and then flip the script. I think we have enough of that in Washington, D.C. I want people to know what I care about. So Bill, tell me why you were concerned about my candidacy in bringing this issue of addiction to the forefront.
Well, I think you're taking a very courageous position. And unfortunately, the people that are running against you they want to latch on to this soft on crime, soft on drugs, because then they don't have to talk about the other issues where you have the right side and they're obviously on the wrong side. I wanted to
Bill,
say,
I think the guy I'm running against is on the wrong side of a whole lot of stuff. So
absolutely.
But go ahead, tell me.
Well, I wanted to say that every point that Roger made, he nailed it. And we could stop. Well, we have 150 Americans dying every day. and the senators and congressmen are saying, oh, we're going to do something about it. So they throw more money at it. But Roger's right. All we need to do is change our mind. If we could get the American public to realize that this is not a criminal matter. Drug abuse is a crime only because we made it a crime. In many other countries, they don't take that approach. And if we looked at this as a medical problem, which is what it is, we could make some progress.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, if you send somebody through the criminal justice system, you cut off the only thing they really need to be successful, and that's hope. I don't care what treatment program you're using, 12-step, AA, NA, reality therapy, any of those. If you don't have hope, how do you expect these people to make it? Because as Roger said, their brain does not operate the way we think it does. We think, well, we'll make this a crime, they'll quit doing it. Well, we got 50 years now, and we know absolutely that doesn't work unless you own stock in a private prison, and your only desire is to make sure we keep all those beds full. If you want to make a difference, get rid of the war on drugs and treat this as a medical problem, and quit thinking that you know how to stop people from doing this with the tough love or slap on the wrist or any of these things. That I feel like I shouldn't be talking. Roger nailed it so well.
Well, Roger is getting ready to say something else. I was going to talk, and he silenced me and said, "Wait a minute, I got something to say." Go ahead. Roger.
Just to reiterate on what you said about being on the right side of the fence, the wrong side of the fence, or you may lose votes or you may gain votes. I'm a farmer, okay? I plant seeds and I make them grow, or try to make them grow. It takes some help from Mother Nature. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to this topic here, because I allow myself to get drawn into these conversations on Facebook from time to time. I've kind of cut it back, but anyhow, my attitude is, and I want to share this with you, that regardless if it gets you votes or not, you're still out there and you're planting that seed.
That's right. And that's what's important to me.
And if you plant that seed, then we can hope that it prospers and grows. But if you don't plant the seed, you ain't going to get nothing.
And you know what, Roger? My purpose for running is to do something about all of the issues that I see that are issues that people who have no voice, people whose voices aren't being heard, and people whose situations there's nothing being done about those situations. So if my candidacy itself helps to change those things, then I'm going to raise my voice about those things. Those are the things that matter to me, the things that matter to the people in my district, and the things that keep me up at night. And this is one of those things. This is one of the things that, I had an attorney friend of mine who had shared with me that in her job, she's responsible for compiling all of the cases relative to opioid addiction. And one of the things that is bothering her is that it's wiping out entire towns. Entire towns are literally being wiped out by this. And the issue is something that is not being spoken of. And I have a theory about why those voices are being silenced. Part of it is something that Bill brought up, and that is who's benefiting from keeping it quiet. People who are in the pockets of the pharmaceutical industry definitely don't want this conversation to be had. And you've got to question people's motivation for everything they say and they do. If there is somebody who could gain from this issue, it would definitely be somebody who would be in the pockets of the pharmaceutical industry, which is why I think we need to get money out of politics. We need to have people who are willing to advocate without regard to who's donating to their campaigns. I I don't accept money from big donors and corporations because I don't want to be owned by those corporations. I want to advocate for people like Roger, people like Bill, and I want to be a voice for those people as opposed to a voice for the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, I speaking for myself, appreciate that, highly respect that. Thank you very much. I too once had my own theory, and I still think it kind of holds true today, along with what everything you said. But I noticed in my walk, because I've dealt with this addiction thing for close to 20 years now of my kids. And my addiction is smoking. I'm 1 year without a cigarette, so the two run hand in hand, and there's a lot of similarities. But anyhow, through all this with my kids, I noticed through them and others that the average user out here in the street, such as my kids and stuff, spent more time behind bars than the people that were selling it.
Interesting.
And I think that's changing some now. But the only theory that I could come up with, I mean, I can't prove it, but it's just the Roger Weinmiller theory that in certain jurisdictions, per se, if I was a drug dealer, mm-hmm. and I have 35 clients that come to me and buy from me, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, if they take me down and put me behind bars, that's 35 people, potential cases they have to lose money on running revenue through the courts, the court costs, and mm-hmm. et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Yes, some 35 people are going to keep on buying, but the next person they buy from might be out of that jurisdiction.
And you know what, Roger?
Yeah. Like I say, that's just
you're right. You're right. And honestly, if this government or any other administration wanted to put an end to this drug epidemic and crisis, there are two places that they could go. One would be to the pharmaceutical industry to say, stop selling drugs and marketing drugs to doctors as the addictive drugs, as the only alternative to kill pain. Stop selling alcohol, stop doing this, stop doing that. Or they could go after, for the illegal drug market, they could go after people with the planes, the trains, and the ships that are bringing it into the country. But that's not the approach that they take. Because you're right. Because as long as they continue to focus on those who are addicted to the drugs, they have a ready market for the prison industrial complex.
I hate to say that because, I mean, it sounds like, here again, that people are putting money before people. Mm-hmm. And but with me saying that, though, I think that things have changed extensively the opposite way in the last 3 or 4 years. There's more and more jurisdictions that are coming up that are having drug courts.
Yes.
I think in Claremont County, I think they offer a drug treatment program if you're incarcerated in the county jail, I believe. And the problem with some of this is there is a criminal element mm-hmm. to this whole thing.
Yeah, we don't want to eliminate.
But sort of like what Bill was saying, there's many people in prison over possession of marijuana, which in my eyes is not as bad as alcohol, but that's just a matter of opinion.
Are you trying to say you inhale?
Well, yeah, I inhaled when I smoked it, but I think alcohol is much more of a problem than what the marijuana is. But they're in there for lesser charges. Let them out. There was a documentary I watched, and I'd recommend you two or anybody listening that watches this watch it. It's called Pleasures Unwoven. And it's a documentary. Pleasures Unwoven. It's a documentary about a doctor that came down with addiction. Mm-hmm. All through his addiction, there was a discussion between disease and choice. Mm-hmm. And once he went into recovery, as a doctor with his medical background, he researched it, and he used the hills out in Utah as to emulate different parts of the brain and has hoses and ropes and everything in different colors. And in the end, he proves that it is a disease. But at the beginning of the documentary, he talked much about like what Bill had discussed about the number of people that we have locked up in prisons, not county jails, but prisons, over drug charges that probably really don't need to be there.
Right. So there are a few things that I think that we need to be talking about relative to the drug crisis. One is healthcare, because without healthcare, people don't have access to treatment. What are your thoughts on the government paying for healthcare? What do you think?
Well, when you say the government running anything, I kind of cringe because there's not very few things that I can think of that our federal government has run that they have been successful at. Social Security is a disaster, Medicare, Medicaid, and they're all struggling and stuff. So don't think I'm really supportive of a government-run healthcare, but I do believe with you 100% that addiction should be covered under your private insurance, whatever type of insurance you have, that it should be covered because it is a medical disease. And what's really sad is if I didn't have any health insurance and I was in whatever town you want to name off and I have a heart attack or get shot or break a leg, whatever, they can't refuse me treatment.
Well,
if you're an addict and you want treatment, you're either going to have the bucks to pay for it or insurance. If you don't have either one, sorry about your luck.
Yeah. Okay. And Bill, tell us what you think about that. Tell us, should the government fund healthcare to ensure that people who have addictions are properly covered?
Well, absolutely. The cost of treatment is just out of this world. And let me, as an aside, mention that I really am not a supporter of drug courts. I've heard the judges and even police officers that are talking about addiction, and they sound like they know what they're talking about, and I'm really hopeful. And then at the end, they say, well, we got to catch them first. Well, once you catch them, you've ruined their life. What you'd like to be able to offer somebody to get them enthusiastic about treatment is to tell them, hey, if you get this right, we could put you back to almost your whole life you had before. Exactly. And right now, that's just the war on drugs makes that not possible.
There's actually programs like that. I'm not going to name counties, but there was one that I was aware of that they had something that gave you that chance, but the perimeters they had set up were next to impossible to meet. My personal belief is if you get caught, you get charged. And because the thing with an addict, they're not going to get help unless they want it. It's just like me on my smoking. I didn't stop smoking until I wanted to stop smoking, okay? So a lot of times when they're caught, they're not mentally wanting to give up this addiction because they're in love with it so much and it makes them feel so good. So there comes the forcibility issue of it. And my belief is to mandate a very extensive treatment program. And when I say extensive, if it calls for some jail time, whatever, but I'm talking about a minimum of 1 year of substance abuse and mental health counseling, but preferably 2 to 3 years, because it takes the brain a total at least 6 months to a year to detox from the chemicals, okay, to get back to where it can actually heal and start working properly. To mandate this program and that you complete this program, but if you don't complete this program, then have this huge jail term hanging over your head with time on the shelf. Something that would be a little bit more of a driving force to go from the I'm not ready for it to, well, I better do this. It kind of happens like at some now, but I don't think it's done properly because they just do it to appease the court, but it's all short term, and 30-day, 90-day programs are a waste.
Yeah, and I, as I might have shared with both of you, I think at least for sure you, Roger, that I'd spoken with a mom who told me, she said, I believe that treatment should be mandatory. And she says, if it had been mandatory for my son to spend some time in treatment and forced treatment, locked up in a treatment facility, she said, if that had happened for my son, he might still be alive.
And as I've told people, that if I'd have known, this past Christmas was 3 years for my son, this coming Easter will be 4 years for my daughter. And I've often told people that if I'd known then what I know now, no, I could not sit here and guarantee you that they would still be alive. But I could tell you they had a better chance of fighting it and beating the addiction just because of my knowledge of addiction and my understanding and the love and support that it takes to get these people through it. Because a lot of people think that once you get into treatment, you're home free. And no one wants to step up to the plate and offer to take them to treatment or offer to take them to a probation or all the various different things. They just get kind of hung up to dry. And if they get that, the society smacks them in the face and makes it hard for them to get a job because they are labeled as a druggie. And that's changing, but it's just, it comes back to the stigma and education thing. It really does.
You know, one of the things, and then I'll go to Bill, but one of the things that bothers me even about incarceration as an option is that incarceration generally isolates an offender from their family members and from their support system. And so my theory is that when people get out of incarceration and they have to go back into their families and deal with some of the same problems that they had before without really resolving those issues or being able to go through a treatment program with the supportive family members, that treatment doesn't work. It hasn't worked.
But if the treatment program starts while they're incarcerated,
mm-hmm. But giving them access to treatment with family and friends and supportive others, and the ability to be able to have some kind of contact with those family members.
It's true. I mean, you know, we're treading on a line that is very, very thin because, I mean, there's the criminal aspect of, like I say, the possession charge or an instrument charge and things of that nature. Then you have the higher aspect of, and that happens many times where, I mean, there on the farm, I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars of stuff that we've had stolen from the farm from people stealing stuff to take to the junkyard to salvage to supply their habit. And, you know, even though I know that that's not that individual as who they were before addiction, but still they have to be accountable for their action.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you on that. Roger, the question that I'm asking really is, should treatment include supportive family and friends, people who can help in the long term support that person's sobriety? And how do you do that if somebody is locked up?
Well, that's a very tricky question, because if it's one of the families that you're talking about, you don't want them coming in there and adding fuel to the fire. But ideally, and I don't know how realistically this is, but ideally, you know, if the person is incarcerated and there is an effective treatment program for them, likewise, I think there should be a program outside of the jail for the family. There's a support group that's called Families of Addicts. Mm-hmm. And they treat both sides of that, and then let the addict and the family talk together, because there's always two elements. And, you know, if the person starts using because of the family matters at home, then do you really want them coming to the jail and visiting with them and add more fuel to the fire?
I guess I'm not necessarily
saying if they do their own separate program.
Yeah, that they need to go through the same treatment program and be in the same room. I do believe that there are situations by which family members need to be involved in that addict's treatment. They don't necessarily have to be in the same room, but I do believe that if a family isn't treated and if they don't deal with the addiction, even from the standpoint of there are family members who can become codependent and who it doesn't help to become a codependent in an addict's treatment process. But family members need to understand
they do.
This whole idea of addiction and not be isolated from the whole addiction process. Because when somebody gets out of jail or they get out of a treatment program and they go back into the same situation, it's like the common cold. You know, you're going back into that sick situation and nobody understands what it is you're going through. And there's a cycle of addiction that then happens.
One of the things that I came to realize from all of this is for a longest time, I got very agitated because there's been numerous of addicts that have reached out to me, mm-hmm. asking me where they can go for treatment or just wanting to talk, okay? But through that I was able to help out in many, many situations. I thank you, dear Jesus. Mm-hmm. But through all that process, I felt like I wasn't being very effective with my own son that's still alive. Mm-hmm. And what I've come to realize is, okay, not a thing, but say if you were my mother, okay?
I'm not your mother. I'm not old enough to be your mother.
Sister, whichever.
Okay, I'm
You're
your
my family
sister.
member.
Yes. Mhm.
And I'm a struggling addict, and you give me your love, which is natural. I expect that because you are my sister, mother, brother, wife, whatever. But when these addicts get that love from a stranger, the movement is so much more powerful. It has such more because it's true 100% unconditional love. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So
when
as
you get
a
it from a
family
family member,
member,
it's expected to.
right. So as a family member, I think you and I both agree that family members need to understand the addiction.
Yes.
They need to understand how they can help or hinder this person who is addicted.
Yes.
They need to understand how their own personal challenges could contribute to the problem.
Yes.
Be it positive or negative.
Yes.
It could impact it. But what you're saying is there is in addiction treatment, there is a power to finding people who understand, or coming into people who are strangers, coming into contact with people who are strangers, who might share your journey, who understand because maybe they've been there themselves, who can, maybe offer some advice to you, but even a hug and understanding, and how powerful that is even outside of a family member.
Hugs are free and they're very powerful.
Exactly. And I appreciate Bill, who said to you when we started this conversation, if I was there in the room, I'd hug you.
Well,
because
if
Bill
I didn't beat him to it.
Exactly, because Bill understands that there is something that you two share. Being a farmer, he being an attorney, there's something about that human experience that is shared when you both have something that you've experienced, some commonalities to your experience.
I don't know about with Bill, but I know with me that ever since I've lost my kids, then anytime I hear of someone, even on the news, someone I totally don't know, losing their child, it sends a web of emotions to me that I never used to get. And if I hear someone abusing a child, I just, ugh. But also when I'm out and I meet somebody and that comes out in conversation, it's, I was never in the military to understand that bond between your fellow soldier and stuff. But going up, what I've heard people talk about it just, correct me if I'm wrong here, Bill, and feel free to step in here, but it just, when you come across that person that has lost a child to anything, there's just a connection that can't be explained because you're, in my opinion, you're living the pain of all pains. Mm-hmm. And I know for me, and you're a Christian lady, we were all brought up and taught that God gave his only son to die on the cross for our sins, okay? Mm-hmm. When I lost my kids, I put that in a whole different perspective.
It's hard to believe that.
The pain that I experienced from my loss, I can't even fathom what God was feeling.
Would allow that
gave his son. It just, I'll shut up.
Yeah. So, and Bill, any final thoughts? Because we're coming up to an hour, and as I told Roger earlier today or yesterday, I told him, I said, well, people's attention spans aren't much longer than that. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to share before we exit this conversation, Bill?
Well, Vanessa, that I could sit here and talk for 20, 40 hours.
Me too.
I want to just back up everything Roger said. When I run into a person that lost a kid, I say we belong to a club that nobody wants to join.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do is that I love the treatment trial therapies that Roger was describing, but the one big roadblock for any of these treatment programs is the war on drugs. Can you imagine how much more successful any of those programs would be if you could hold a carrot out for the addict that they really could get their life back. I guess that's the most important thing I want to leave.
And, what people don't understand it, and it brings up the issue about Narcan, and we've all heard the stories of, people being Narcan or overdosing 4 or 5 times in a day. And it's not the person being stupid. It's the drive of the addiction. I've had people say, when you hear them stories of a parent or both parents ODing in a car with kids in the backseat, they say, that's where I draw the line at. No, that's the power of the addiction. I'm not making excuses. That's the reality. That is the power of the excuses. That's how much of a hold it has on their life. Because I know what my kids mean to me. And for something to have that much of a hold on my life, to put that before them, that's strong. Mm-hmm. And I think any parent can back that up. And to anybody watching, please, even if you're living addiction, doesn't mean that you understand it. You got to understand that part, because it's 2 totally different things. Mm-hmm. 2 totally different mm-hmm. things. Mm-hmm. And
as you said in the beginning, addiction changes the way people think. So it's not that they want to get high again. If they get Narcan, they're not angry because you screwed up their high. If they're angry, it's because now they have to go out and feed that dragon again. And it's not a choice.
And, you take like diabetes type 2. And I've had a number of people tell me this, you come down with it because either your genetic makeup, your lifestyle, or you're addicted to sugar.
And it's the same with
many people have that, mm-hmm. and they have to have their sugar fixed, but then shortly after that, they have to have their insulin.
Right. And so I definitely appreciate, Bill, your sharing of your time, and Roger as well. Roger and I are going to go and feed a food addiction that I have.
I just think that.
But Roger's right that, even though we all don't share the same addictions, many of us have addictions that, we don't acknowledge. And if we can understand just how much those addictions, whether it be food or sex or workaholics or whatever your addiction might be, surely you can understand and identify with what somebody who has an opioid addiction might be dealing with.
I think what divides them is the criminal part. Like with opiates or drugs, they're illegal. Where right. Sugar, nicotine, alcohol, gambling, etc.
Those things are illegal, right? Legal.
They're legal and accepted by society. So right. A lot of people may have this addiction and don't even realize that they have the addiction. I mean, right. I've called people out before, and I used to be a smoker, but they were talking about somebody having an addiction, then they are smoking a cigarette.
Right.
What about that?
And as Bill said, we determined, our government, and we the people are the government, we determine what's illegal and what's not illegal. Mm-hmm. We determine what's bad and what's good. And some of those things, even, God says are bad that we say are okay, right? Mm-hmm. So we're ultimately the determining factors about what is acceptable and what isn't. But these things, there are, as some people might say, there are levels to these things. There are things that, there are complexities, and there are things that overlap, and challenges such as mass incarceration, healthcare, and all sorts of other things that.
Love thy neighbor as you would yourself.
Thank you.
You do that, and everything else starts falling in place.
Thank you.
There was a post I reposted on Facebook here several weeks ago. Before you judge me, unless you are perfect, don't judge me. Something to that nature. We are not to judge at all.
And I'm using those exact same things on my Facebook post. In fact, I've said to people who want to judge certain people and the things they don't agree with, I tell them all the time, and they're Christians. These are people who call themselves Christians. And I say all the time, Do you know what Jesus did when somebody had brought a woman before him who was caught in the very act of adultery? He knelt down and he wrote in the dirt. And then we don't know what he wrote, but he wrote something in the dirt. And then he looked up at the crowd and said, okay, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Since you want to deal with this woman's sin, let's deal with your sin. Let's deal with everybody's sin. And then the person who doesn't have sin gets to cast the first stone. How many guys do you think were left standing and to throw a brick at that woman?
0, because there's only one perfect person.
None of us.
I'm pretty close.
Yeah, whatever. And I really wanted to have this conversation with Roger and with Bill today. And I appreciate the idea that we come from different worlds and different perspectives, especially politically, we come from different worlds and perspectives, because despite the fact that we do come from different perspectives, we share something in common.
You know, that said, there was a group that I can't think of it. It's sort of like a political group. I can't think of the name of it now. But they have this, I was really apprehensive about the first one I went to. But anyhow, they have a group, they call them Reds and Blues instead of Republicans and Democrats. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But people from both sides of the fence. And then they come up, there's a certain core group, people that kind of run the meeting, whatever. But they come up with these main topic things that are going on now, and they present it to them, and then at the end you come together. And even though, especially DC is the worst example you could ever have of anything, but at the end of the day, you come to find out that a lot of times the differences aren't as big as what you think they are.
We all want the same things. We just have
down
different ways of approaching those same things.
It comes to swallow your ego, your pride, and admitting that somebody else might have the better idea or whatever it may be. I mean, there's times you're very far apart, but there's more common ground than what people really think that they are.
And I think we need to be looking for common ground, and that's why we're having this conversation today. I knew the moment I met you, because you told me I'm a Republican, and I said, and I'm a Democrat. Well, but we're purple, right? We're here having a purple conversation, and I want to continue having these purple conversations.
Where's the purple
and so
come from?
that's blue and red mixed together. Okay. And my colors, my campaign colors, the last time I ran were blue, and this time around they're red. And you know why I changed my colors? Because I was born on Valentine's Day, and I got sick of looking at blue. Red is my favorite color.
Happy early birthday.
Well, thank you. But I prefer to be purple. I want to be somewhere understanding and listening to people on both sides. And so that's why we're having a conversation. Right. You're absolutely right.
Everybody's got a story.
So if you have a story that you want to share, and you know that it's consistent or even inconsistent with my view on anything, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you and just kind of talk ideas. But moreover, if you have an important issue that impacts you, that you think just the opportunity to have a conversation in order to get the word out about those things, please reach out to me, and we will see if we can make something meaningful happen as a result of these conversations. Thank you so much, Roger, for being here.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you, Bill, for being here. And again, if you want to learn more about me, feel free to go to enochforcongress.com. Donate to my campaign. It takes money to run these things, and hopefully I can be successful in the campaign. But if not, hopefully I'll also have the opportunity to elevate this issue to a level where people are paying attention to it. And Bill, the answer to your question is yes. Roger said absolutely. He would love to be able to stay in contact with you. And so I appreciate the ability to connect with people who share things that I am passionate about. So please feel free, reach out to me. And you guys have a wonderful afternoon. And hopefully we have said something that will resonate with you today. Hopefully.
Hope we planted many
Planted some
seeds.
seeds, many seeds. Of
Many
course,
seeds.
this is a farmer telling you to go out and plant seeds, right?
Tis the season. Well, it's not quite the season yet, but it's getting there. So.
Yeah, and Roger and I may have to come back and talk farming too. That's something we didn't talk about, but I saw an interesting video that I posted on my Facebook page of a farmer who was just really, he showed up at Mitch McConnell's fundraising event expressing his anger over what's happening to the farm industry. So maybe that's a topic we'll come back and talk about. Maybe not, who knows? But anyway, thanks a lot, guys, for being here. And I hope to have some other conversations where we have an opportunity to share with one another. Take care and have a wonderful and blessed day.